I am an African.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Africa for Dummies. So, breaking news just coming out of Zambia. In Zambia, they have just added 70 new constituencies. That's right, 70 new constituencies, bringing the total number of seats to 226. This is the biggest expansion in its history. But before we get into that, be sure to support us by hitting that like button, hitting that subscription and notification bell so that you do not miss anything Africa. And as always, I am joined here by the co-host, Mr. Zenge.
Hello, everyone. Good to be back.
Yeah, so Zenge, we're here discussing this breaking news story. 70 new constituencies. Not one, not two, but 70 new constituencies. And this is happening just a few months before the 2026 elections. So let me know, what's going on here?
Thanks, Nathan. So, if you've been following A4D, you remember that we actually did a breakdown on Bill 7 back in 2025. Bill 7's key aspects and aims were actually to expand representation, adjust how constituencies are structured, and ultimately modernize Zambia's electoral system to include other forms of voting. So, what we're seeing now is that the reform is basically being implemented. So, what was announced on April the 16th, 2026? The Electoral Commission of Zambia, this is the body that manages all of Zambia's elections, was led by Mwangala Zalumis, announced that there were 70 new constituencies, increasing the number of constituencies from 156 directly elected constituencies to 226. Remember that there's an extra 40 proportional representation seats, PR, and 10 nominated seats by the president, making it about 276 seats. What we're looking at right now is the directly elected seats from the constituencies in which you draw directly elected members of parliament. So the parliament basically dissolves on the 15th of May, 2026, and elections are on August the 13th, 2026. So not long from now.
Just to add to that,
general elections.
Precisely. So just to add to that, Parliament dissolves usually a few months before the election takes place, and this is not. This is to make sure that there isn't a conflict of interest going on. But before we dive into what is actually going on, just to paint a picture for our listeners out there, the historical context of what's going on. So Zambia has gradually been expanding their representation since independence. Now, this makes whole lot of sense, right? You have more people living in different areas and they all need to be represented when it comes to picking their leaders. So in 1964, and that was the time when Zambia was getting its independence, there was around 3.5 million people, right? And they had only 75 constituencies. And that kept on growing from the 1960s, where we had about and they continue to increase. We had about 4 to 5 million people, and that went all the way up to in 2014, where we had approximately 156 constituencies, right? That's what we had at around 2014. Now in 2026, we have 226 constituencies representing around 20 million. I want to say over 20 million people. So our population has grown massively, and the states and parliament are obviously stating that the reason for this expansion is largely due to having people's voices represented. I think we also discussed that in our last video with those extra seats that Zenge was also previously discussing, that basically those are there to represent youth, disabled people, and various other voices, women, voices that are typically pushed over to the side. So that's the reason that we're hearing for this thing. I mean, of course, the timing is a bit suspicious, but before we even get into that, Zenge, I think you're going to give us a breakdown of what these seats actually look like.
Yeah, so let's look at the new constituencies and actually what went down, and let's look at the breakdown. So Central Province, rich in agriculture, has got 8 new seats. So we've moved from 15 to 23 seats, right? The Copperbelt, obviously famous for being the historic copper mineral engine of Zambia, has got 7 new seats from 22 original seats. Now it's got 29 seats. Eastern Province has got 9 extra new seats, so from 20 to 29. Southern Province, which is famous for livestock, for tourism, energy production, the Kariba Dam, got 9 new seats, so it's moved now from 20 to 29 seats. Western Province has got an extra 7 seats, so from 19 to 26 seats. Lusaka province, where the capital is, diversified service sort of sector economy, got 6 new seats. So from 12 to 18 seats. Muchinga province, Zambia's youngest province, the 10th province, has got 6 new seats from 8 to 14. Northern province, 6 new seats from 13 to 19. Northwestern province from 7, has got 7 new seats and from 12 to 19 seats in total. And Luapula province from has got 5 new seats, so 15 to 20 seats. So this is where it basically gets a bit interesting. Muchinga province, Zambia's newest province, has actually seen the largest increase in total numbers. 75 has seen a 75% increase in its number of constituencies per province. And Copperbelt also saw the smallest, where only 32% increase. So while everyone basically gains seats, not necessarily everyone gets it equally, but this is for various reasons. Sometimes it's based on population, mainly population, but also geography, and also Muchinga province is Zambia's newest province, so perhaps, and it's quite big as well. So geographically speaking, it might be quite hard to manage per member of parliament, and that's one of those issues of traveling around and one member of parliament being able to reach every corner of it. So yeah, so some provinces are growing, others are sort of being reshaped slightly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Nathan, what
So
sort of analysis can we see in 20? Yeah.
in this upcoming election, I think it's going to be really interesting. I mean, there is a huge what if scenario, which is that what if 2021 actually repeats itself? Now, for those who don't know, in Zambia, 2021, Zambia had an election in which the current government, or the current political party, the United Party for National Development, UPND, won by a landslide. I mean, that was one of the largest
60, over 60,
wins.
around 50% of the vote, 59 to 60% of the vote. Yeah.
Precisely. So, which is something that is really, really unheard of. So, if that was to actually happen, if this current election that's coming up was to mirror that election in 2020, so in 2021, just to give people a bit of context, the UPND performed strongly in Southern Province, where they typically usually perform really well, in Western and in Northwestern Province, and then also competitively in Lusaka and Copperbelt, right? So Lusaka and Copperbelt are like the two major, holds the two major cities, the provinces that hold the two major cities in Zambia. So Lusaka province holds the capital, which is Lusaka, and then the Copperbelt holds the other biggest city, or the other most populated city, I should argue, which is Ndola. Now, I could be wrong on that, but
Plan Kitwe.
those are the
Yeah.
two.
Big,
Ndola and
big
Kitwe,
urban.
right?
This is a big urban.
If the UPND sweeps all of its strongholds, they start with 27% of parliament total seats, right? Remember, there are 276 seats. And remember that those 40 PR seats that we talked about, and the 10 nominated seats, in addition to the 226 seats directly elected. Now, that's a solid base, but far from the majority of 66%, which is 2/3 of the parliament, needed to change or amend the constitution without bargaining with independent MPs and other political parties in the parliament, like the UPND did with Bill 7 last year. That's a really powerful base before even touching swing regions and shaving off minority or total seats in other provinces. But elections in Zambia aren't won in strongholds alone. They're decided along what's known as the line of rail. And I think, Zenge, you can explain more about what this means.
Yeah, so the line of rail basically is the corridor of urban settlement in Zambia, from southern province, from Livingston, all the way up through to Choma, big cities like Choma, Mazabuka, Monzi, strong UPND heartlands, and strongholds that are almost guaranteed that UPND will get huge votes from there. And then into Lusaka province, which includes Kafue, the capital city, of course, Lusaka, then, Chisamba, and then onwards into, some cities in Central Province like Kapirimposhi, Kawe, and then up into Copperbelt, right? But primarily, the population lies in the most populated provinces in Zambia are the Copperbelt, which has 29 seats, Lusaka, which now has 18 seats, Southern Province, which has 29 seats, and actually Eastern Province comes neck on neck with Southern Province, but the main urban center in terms of battlegrounds really rests in the biggest cities, such as those in Lusaka and the Copperbelt. Basically, the most urbanized, most populated, and most economically critical provinces are those two. Then, if Zambia had swing states, historically, those provinces that normally vote are the ones that the ones that determine the winner are normally Lusaka and Eastern Province. So if UPND repeats its 2021 performance, wins strongholds, holds Lusaka, competes strongly in the Copperbelt and Central, then they are likely to win the presidency and secure a strong parliamentary majority. But there's also the risk of losing Lusaka or Copperbelt if that does happen, which some people think is quite unlikely, at least on the presidential level. They could probably face a more competitive streak. But the important thing to notice here is let's not read too much from the parliamentary seats allocations and try and think that this will also reflect on the presidency. Yes, some people do vote uniformly, from the ward level, the lowest representative, to the district level, so mayors and district council chairpersons, members of parliament at the national level, and the president. But this let's not just assume that this is a uniform way, because independents can win. Some people mix their votes sometimes, especially in urban centers like Lusaka and Copperbelt, where voters probably want a mixture or are probably undecided. And the presidential race is direct, right? So these seats allocations are not necessarily like, let's say, in America, where the amount of seats or the amount of electoral college votes in the American system ultimately results in what can who can be the president, right? But it's mostly about whether or not the ruling party can expand or reduce or maintain its share of parliament in order to pass new laws which will affect your daily life. And so that's really something that we have to look at, and how parliament could become fragmented towards
Yeah.
the general election. Yeah.
I think for me, what's really fascinating is just the timing of everything. I think that's what makes it very concerning or raises an eyebrow, at the
Yeah.
very
The
least, at
timing
least.
is something that people Yeah, the timing is something that people have raised concerns, at least in the netizen social media space. It's less than 130 days until the next election. It just I've always talked about this with Nathan. People should think about campaigns almost like, if you think of a, I don't want to mention the name, but if you think of a network company in your country or in your area, right? Think of how many times you've seen their adverts, their posters everywhere. And think of doing that in 90 days all over the country, every rural area, every community, every neighborhood, and then shutting it down in 100 days. So it's not a small thing. It requires a lot of resources. And for you to be a opposition party and just get that information now, it's a bit crazy, because now it means you have 70 new places
Places
to.
where you need to, yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah. Yeah. So what should people take away from this? We have new constituencies. This is the largest expansion in its history. In Zambia's history, we see an expansion like this, and it comes directly from the Bill 7 reforms, and it could really reshape the parliamentary power of 2026, especially if the UPND performs as it did in 2021. Is there anything that you'd add to that? I mean,
I think it's something that I think people should really look at the relationship between the president and the parliament. As I said, look at both votes seriously. Many people focus on who the president is, and they just forget about everything else and assume. UPND did not win 2/3 majority in the last election, even though the president won with a strong mandate. So that's something to tell you about the strength of the president. Relies also on the parliament. At least that's how the system was built. And to change the system, you need a 2/3 majority. So it goes back to parliament really has the power to change things that will last for a long time. Yeah, ECZ basically said that this was done based on population growth, geographic balance, accessibility, community representation across 116 districts. And so there's pros and cons to it. Obviously, we mentioned that timing was not very good. And massive resources will be required, and opposition is pretty much split up. So it's going to be very difficult for opposition to galvanize themselves with 70 more new constituencies, plus the 40 proportional representation. Although that's not about mobilization, that's about allocation based on your final vote count. And you can see that in our other video. But yeah, it's a huge moment for Zambia's electoral map, political map, because ultimately it will affect your direct laws, from cybersecurity, as you saw last year, to even the nutrition that you are allowed to put in certain food products in the shop that you buy, let's say, cooking oil from. That's how deep it might affect your life.
right. And I think that's a great summary of what's going on here. So for all you listeners out there, please be sure to share this video to basically let everyone know what's going on within our lovely country of Zambia. And be sure to like, share, subscribe. It really helps us get our message there and our mission to support freedom of press. Thank you so much for checking out Africa for Dummies. See you guys on the next one.
I am an African.